I am Chayton Storm, and I have dedicated my life to listening to and sharing the impactful stories of indigenous peoples. Stories of resilience, loss, and hope here in the U.S. and around the world. Now, with the new Trump administration initiative, a direct channel has been opened in Washington, allowing our indigenous brothers and sisters to bring their voices, their struggles, and their truths to the government's attention. This is an unyielding battle to ensure we are heard, recognized, and respected. In this video, you will see a shocking account so intense that it moved even the corridors of the White House. Karoline Leavitt, known for her strength and determination, was visibly shaken by this story. Prepare yourself. What you are about to hear is real, it is brutal, and it carries a deep pain, but also an unbreakable strength.
The wind howled like a wounded animal that morning. It was not just cold. It was a cold that seeped into the bones and froze every thought, every dream, and every hope. My name is Anna, and this is the kind of cold that we, the Inuit, have known since birth. It is our constant companion, our closest enemy. But that day, the cold took much more than the feeling from my fingers. It took my whole heart. Many times I am asked how I can speak about this now, how the words do not freeze in my throat when I try to explain what happened that morning. The truth is, they do freeze. Every time I tell this story, I feel the ice forming again around my chest, just like that day. But some stories need to be told even if they destroy us in the process. My children, Nanouk and Kallik, were not just kids. They were little lights dancing over the eternal ice of our existence. Nanouk, at 10 years old, already carried in his eyes the wisdom of the elders, always observing, always learning. Kallik, only 8, had a laugh that could melt even the oldest glacier. When he laughed, everyone around had to laugh too. It was impossible to resist. They were good boys, obedient, respectful. Children who understood what it meant to live on the edge of the world, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Our village was by the great lake Imiktuk, the place where the water is deeper than all stories, as the elders would say. In winter, the lake transformed into a vast desert of ice, a white expanse that seemed to stretch to the horizon, merging with the sky. In summer, its dark waters held the secrets of generations. It was our provider, our pathway, and sometimes our greatest danger. Atiq, my husband, was the best hunter in the community. His hands were steady with the harpoon. His eyes saw where others only saw white on white. His steps on the ice were so silent that even the most skittish seals did not notice his approach. Our children adored him, following in his footsteps with shining eyes of admiration, especially Nanouk. "One day I will be like father," he always said, clutching the small training harpoon that Atiq had carved for him when he turned 7. Our life was not easy, but it never is for us. The modern world is slowly reaching even the most remote places, and our community existed in that delicate balance between tradition and survival. We had a school where the children learned English and math, but also spent entire afternoons with the elders, listening to stories, learning to read the ice, to understand the secrets of the wind and the messages of the auroras. We lived in a simple but warm house. The walls covered in skins protected us, and the small oil stove kept the worst of the cold outside. At night, we all gathered in a circle, and I sewed while Atiq told stories to the boys. Stories of great hunts, of ancient spirits, of survival. Nanouk and Kallik's eyes sparkled in the dim light, absorbing every word as if they were precious drops of water during a drought. And then came the winter that changed everything. It was a different winter from the start. The elders noticed first, observing signs that less trained eyes would never perceive. The ice formed later, and when it came strangely in irregular patterns, tracing treacherous paths where once there were safe routes. The seals changed their habits. The fish disappeared from places where they had always been. Storms were more frequent, more furious, as if the very sky were angry. Atiq returned from hunts later and later, more exhausted each time, with less and less. What had once been a one-day hunt now took 3. What had once been guaranteed now turned into uncertainty. I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Fear. Not the common fear we all feel in the face of the vast white, but a deeper fear, the fear of failing his family. The ice is singing different songs. He told me one night when the children were already asleep. Songs I do not know. Our pantry, which would normally be full at this time of year, was worryingly empty. We rationed every piece of meat, every drop of oil. The children noticed, of course. Children always notice, even when we try to shield them from the truth. I saw how Nanouk looked at the almost empty plate, and then at his younger brother, discreetly pushing his portion to Kallik. It was then that it happened. On a particularly difficult hunt, ATIQ stepped on thin ice, something that would never happen under normal conditions. He, who could read the ice like others read books, fell into a trap of nature. The fall was not long, but enough. His leg broke in 2 places, the sound of the bone echoing in the vast white like a gunshot. He managed to drag himself back home, his face twisted in pain, trails of blood marking his path on the ice. When I heard the dogs barking differently and opened the door, the weight of the world fell on my shoulders. ATIQ, always so strong, always so unshakable, now lay in the sled, his face pale as death, his blue lips whispering disconnected words. We called the community nurse, a young man from the south who had come to work with us less than a year ago. He did what he could, but the leg was bad. Very bad. He needs to go to the hospital in the city, the nurse said, his face grave. But the weather is getting worse. The plane won't come for at least a week. A week. 7 days that felt like an eternity. ATIQ was medicated, his leg immobilized with what we had on hand. The fever took him that night, making him delirious, calling names of long-deceased ancestors. Nanouk and Kallik watched it all with wide eyes of fear. They had never seen their father, their hero, so vulnerable. The weather worsened, as the nurse had predicted. A snowstorm settled over our community, isolating us even more from the outside world. The days dragged on, each bringing more hunger, more worry. Our pantry was now truly empty. The little the community could share was not enough. The faces of the children grew thinner each day, their eyes deeper. I tried to hunt in Atik's place, using the basic skills he had taught me over the years, but I was not him. The ice did not speak to me the same way. The wind did not whisper its secrets in my ears. I returned empty-handed, once, twice, 3 times. The guilt consumed me from within, colder than any winter. It was on the morning of the 5th day after the accident that I noticed the silence. Our house always had sounds: the crackling of the fire, the breathing of the children, the movement of the furs when someone turned in their sleep. But that morning, there was only Atik's occasional groan, still battling the fever. Nanouk and Kallik were not in their beds. At first, I thought they had gone out to play, despite the intense cold and the little light. Children are like that, they find joy even in the most unlikely places. I went out to call them, the wind cutting my face like blades of ice. I called their names, once, twice, 10 times. Only the echo of my own voice responded. That was when I noticed the small footprints in the fresh snow, 2 trails side by side, heading toward the lake. My heart stopped for a moment, then raced hard enough to crack the ice beneath my feet. They wouldn't do that. They knew the dangers. They knew that the ice this year was treacherous, that even ATIQ did not fully trust it. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, my lungs burning with the cold air, my muscles screaming in protest. But I could not stop. I couldn't slow down for even a second. Something inside me already knew, but I refused to accept it. When I reached the edge of the lake, I saw Atik's fishing gear thrown there. Nanouk's small training harpoon was missing. And then, just a few meters from the shore, I saw the hole in the ice. An irregular hole, like an open mouth in the midst of the endless white. I didn't think. I didn't stop to consider the danger. I simply threw myself belly first onto the ice and began to crawl toward the hole, distributing my weight as much as possible, just as ATIQ had taught me. The ice groaned and cracked beneath me, threatening to give way at any moment. When I reached the edge of the hole, the black water looked back at me like a malignant eye. I called their names, screamed until my throat burned. Only silence responded. With hands trembling from cold and fear, I began to feel the icy water, knowing that every second of contact with that water robbed the vital heat from my body. It was then that my fingers touched something, a fabric. I pulled with all the strength I had, ignoring the ice cutting into my palms, ignoring the water that was now soaking my clothes. And then, emerging from the depths like a nightmare creature, I saw Kallik's face. His eyes were closed, his lips blue, his black hair frozen in grotesque patterns. A sound escaped from my throat, something between a scream and a lament, a sound that even I didn't recognize as human. I pulled his small body onto the ice, immediately starting to press on his chest as the nurse had taught us. "Breathe," I pleaded. "Please, breathe." The body was stiff, the skin cold as the ice itself. There was no life there. Not anymore. But Nanouk. Where was Nanouk? I returned to the hole, now almost blind from the tears freezing on my face. I plunged my entire arm into the dark water, ignoring the stabbing pain the cold caused. Nothing. I dove deeper, leaning dangerously over the hole. The ice groaned in warning. It was then that I saw through the clear water a glimmer, Nanouk's small harpoon, trapped under the ice a few meters away. Following the direction, I noticed a darker shape beneath the frozen surface. I crawled over, frantically clearing the snow to see through the ice. And there he was, my Nanouk, floating as if he were sleeping, his face turned upward, looking through the ice at a sky he could no longer see. His hands were stretched upward, fingers curled as if he were still trying to break the ice, find a way back to the surface, back home, back to me. I pounded on the ice with my bare fists, trying to break it, knowing it was futile. The ice was too thick here, too strong. I struck until my hands bled, leaving red stains on the white surface. I called his name one last time, hoping that somehow he could hear me, wherever he was now. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time loses its meaning when your world ends. At some point, I felt hands pulling me back, distant voices, as if coming from another world. They were people from the community who had noticed my absence, who came to search. They found a mother slowly freezing beside her son's body, staring fixedly at the other son trapped under the ice. What happened next is a blur of pain and disbelief. They retrieved Nanouk's body by breaking the ice with axes. They carried both small bodies back to the village, wrapped in skins, as if they could still feel the cold. I followed them like a ghost, unable to cry, unable to speak, unable even to feel the cold burning my exposed skin. ATIQ knew as soon as he saw me enter. I saw in his eyes the exact moment when his world ended too. He tried to get up, to fall from the bed, to drag himself to the bodies of the children that now lay in our room. The fever had subsided, but the weakness remained. I held him as he collapsed, his body shaking with sobs so deep they seemed to come from the very earth. "They just wanted food," he repeated through tears. "They just wanted to help." It was then that we found the note, a crumpled piece of paper in Nanouk's coat pocket, the childish writing blurred by water. "We're going to bring fish for dinner. Don't worry. We know how to be careful. Love, Nanouk and Kallik." We later discovered what had happened. The boys, seeing the empty pantry, worried about their sick father and exhausted mother, decided it was time to take responsibility. Nanouk, feeling almost like a man at 10 years old, convinced Kallik that they could fish in the lake. They knew where ATIQ kept his gear. They had seen their father do it hundreds of times. It seemed simple. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the ice that year was different, treacherous, that even ATIQ, with all his experience, had been betrayed by it. They didn't know that the spot where it would normally be safe to fish was now as thin as paper, ready to break under the slightest weight. They fell together. That comforts me, in some sick way, that they weren't alone in that final moment, that they had each other when the darkness came. I imagined Nanouk trying to save his brother, swimming in the cold water, desperately searching for an exit, until the cold finally overcame him and he joined Kallik in eternal darkness. Time passes strangely after you lose a child. Or two. Days drag on like years, and years pass in the blink of an eye. It's as if you exist in two realities simultaneously, one where every second is torture, and another where decades pass without you noticing. We buried our children according to customs, but also according to what they would have wanted. Nanouk next to Kallik, holding hands as they used to sleep when they were younger. With them, we buried the small harpoon and the worn teddy bear that Kallik had since he was a baby. I placed between them the story I used to read to them every night, The Star Brothers, about two boys who ascend to the sky and become constellations to guide lost hunters. ATIQ recovered physically, but something broke inside him that day, something no doctor could fix. His eyes, once so alive, now seemed to look permanently at a distant point, as if searching for the silhouettes of two boys on the white horizon. For a long time, guilt consumed me like a parasite. If I had woken up earlier, if I had checked on the children during the night, if I had hidden the fishing gear better, if, a small word that carries the weight of the world. My community supported me in the only way they knew, silently, constant as the eternal ice. They brought food even when we didn't ask. They sat with us on the long, dark nights, sometimes talking, usually just existing beside us, reminding us that we were still part of the world of the living. But it's a different kind of life. A life where you learn to breathe with only half your lungs, to walk with a hole in your chest, to smile even when your heart is breaking for the 1,000th time that day. The seasons changed. The ice melted and froze again. The auroras danced in the sky, indifferent to our pain. The community faced more harsh winters, more changes in the old ice that no longer follows the patterns of our ancestors. Today, when I look at Lake Imiktuk, I don't see just a place of death. I also see the place where my children played on happier days, where Nanouk caught his first fish at 6 years old, his face shining with pride, where Kallik learned to skate, falling and getting up 100 times, laughing at every tumble as if it were the most fun thing in the world. And sometimes when the late afternoon light touches the ice in a certain way, I have the fleeting sensation of seeing two small figures skating in the distance, holding hands, black hair blowing in the wind. I know they aren't really there, that it's just my heart showing me what it longs to see most. But for a moment, in that brief instant between light and darkness, my children are alive again, free and happy, safe in the eternal ice. Telling this story never gets easier. Every word is like tearing a piece from my own body. But I tell it anyway. I tell it so that their names, Nanouk and Kallik, are heard. I tell it so that other parents hold their children a little tighter tonight. I tell it so that people understand that behind the headlines about tragedies in remote communities, there are hearts that bleed just like yours. I tell it because they deserved more days, more laughter, more life. Because they just wanted to help. They just wanted food. They just wanted to be men like the father they admired so much. And I tell it because, somehow, as long as their stories continue to be told, a small part of them remains here. Not under the cold ice, but alive in the words, in the hearts, in the memory. When night falls now, and the stars appear in the infinite sky, I look for a specific constellation, two bright stars, side by side, like brothers holding hands. I don't know if they are really Nanouk and Kallik, guiding lost travelers like in the story. Probably not, but I like to think so. I like to think that, somehow, they found their way home after all. And that, when my own time comes, and I get lost in the white vastness of death, it will be those two stars that will show me the way, guiding me to where they are waiting for me. Two pairs of outstretched arms, two smiles lighting up the darkness as they always did. Until then, I live. I breathe. I tell their stories. I carry their names. And every day, when the sun rises over the ice, I whisper to the wind, they just wanted food. They just wanted to help. And the wind, gentle as only the northern wind can be, carries my words away, spreading them across the world, so that no one forgets my boys, my Nanouk and my Kallik, lost beneath the ice, but forever alive in my heart.
This is the powerful testimony of this Inuit mother, a story that must not be forgotten. If this story moved you, help spread the message, like and share this video. Here, we will continue to bring voices that need to be heard. If you want to support this cause, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Together, we can amplify the voices of our Indigenous brothers and take their stories even further.